Hello and welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca and today I'm on my way to work. It's a Saturday, which is unusual for me, but it's an open day at the university, so I'm going to go and see if there's any prospective students who want to study the subject that I lecture on. My quirk of classic car ownership today is how if a bonnet goes up, suddenly people all very quickly appear. I had some bits of trouble over the weekend last whilst we were at Thoresby Hall, which is what this podcast was about, and I'll tell you some more details about that later in the episode. But the bonnet was going kind of up and down for a little bit of time, and it was amazing how very quickly people come over. I did do a little debate on my Instagram not that long ago about whether you showed your bonnet up or down, and a lot of people said down because of kind of the lines of the car making kind of photos very pretty and things like that. However, it is interesting that when a bonnet goes up, people are particularly interested. Now, today's episode is about our little adventure last weekend up to Thoresby Hall for the Morris Vehicle Register's annual rally. It was their 60th anniversary during 2020, and unfortunately celebrations couldn't go ahead because of COVID. However, they were able to have a really big and special event this year instead, and it was really lovely to be part of it, because last year actually, if it had happened then, selfishly I wouldn't have been able to attend because I just wasn't kind of all part of the clubs and things yet. I hadn't owned Peggy for very long, and so I wouldn't have been booked on in time to attend. So I was quite pleased that I was able to be part of the celebrations this year, alongside loads and loads of other Morris cars, as well as alongside some Austins, some Wolseleys, and a few other cars that crept in as well. It was a really lovely weekend, and we had a fantastic time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we did on each of the days and how we found it. So on the Friday we had booked the whole day off on annual leave, and so we travelled up quite early in the morning. It's only about 2 hours away from us, even at Morris Minor speeds, so it wasn't too long a trip, but we decided to kind of break it up with a visit to Belvoir Castle, which was literally halfway through our kind of drive. It was a place that we'd wanted to actually go early in 2020, but it wasn't open yet. It was off season when we were in the area, so it was nice to be able to kind of have a little walk round and explore, even though it was horrible drizzly weather all day, and get some lunch and things before we headed back to the A1M. As we pulled onto the A1M, we were actually pulling directly behind another Morris Minor, which after a few minutes we realised was actually our friends Derek and Marie. So we followed those for the rest of our journey on the A1M before we pulled off and headed in the direction of Thoresby Hall. We actually booked ourselves into a little hotel not that far from Thoresby Hall, but a lot of people were camping. That was kind of the main way that a lot of people were staying in the area. So Derek and Marie actually pulled off in one direction towards the camping, and we carried on a little bit into Worksop, where we were staying instead. So we pulled into the car park at our hotel. We saw that there was a lovely Morris 6 in the car park as well, which was really nice. So we had a quick nosy about that before we went and checked ourselves in, got ourselves all sorted, and then had a little drink in the bar at the hotel before heading back to Thoresby Hall. Everyone at Thoresby Hall, when we'd arrived, had kind of set themselves up, had a bit of time to get themselves sorted. People were kind of taking their cars off of trailers and things like that. It was really good to see so many of the early 30s and 40s, and even before in some cases Morrises, in so many large numbers. I actually had a family friend growing up who had at one point 2 Morris 8s, and it was really nice to see so many of those cars in one place. It was a bit of a trip down memory lane for me. So we wandered about the campsite, kind of nosing at some of the cars that were being unloaded, and eventually managed to spot our friends, again Derek and Marie. So we sat with those for a little bit and had a little bit of a chat and catch up, because we hadn't seen each other since Kelmarsh, so exchanged a few car show stories and adventures, and eventually it rolled on towards 7 o'clock, which for my partner Jamie was the main event of the weekend. It was the curry night. We'd pre-ordered some curries, and then we were all kind of sat in and around the marquee at the event, and they were bringing in carloads and carloads of curries. So we were all sat there waiting, anticipating for our name to be called. I think there was a little underestimation about how popular such an event would be, and possibly they overwhelmed the curry house a little bit, but it was still quite nice. It was good to get some food, because I don't think the burger vans and things like that that were on site then were open just yet. And it was really just a very nice time to catch up with our friends. We actually had Richard and Michelle sitting with us, as well as Derek and Marie, whilst we were eating our curries on the Friday night, and it was really quite nice. We had a good chat, caught up with each other, and then as it's kind of started to get a little bit later, we realised that our other friends, Liam and Beth, if you watch Austin 7 Adventures, you might be familiar with those two, and they had arrived in their camper ambulance. So we headed over to say hello to them and spent the evening cluttering up the place there before we had to head off site before they locked the gates and back to our hotel. But it was quite late, so we were probably pretty pleased to be heading to get some sleep for the next day. The Saturday was actually really lovely weather, quite surprising actually, considering the whole weekend was forecast for rain, and it was nice to have really nice weather for the 2 events that were happening on that day. So we got back to Thoresby Hall after our breakfast and met up with Richard and Michelle, who had collected our route maps for the Tulip Rally. For those of you who are perhaps wondering what a Tulip Rally is, a tulip map is a particular type of map that uses little diagrams that show you kind of which directions to head at each junction, and it has a few little notes about kind of points of interest that may be relevant and help you spot whether you're on the right track. This particular tulip map relied quite heavily on pubs as their points of reference, and the aim of the rally was to kind of follow each other, use the maps and things to head over to a private collection of cars that was owned by the boss of somebody who was running the rally, and then drive another scenic route back. The event was actually a little bit surprised about how many people wanted to partake in the event, and so ended up dividing the rally into clockwise and anti-clockwise. And I'd never been on a rally that A, had so many cars participating, or B, had this clockwise or anti-clockwise option going. And it was actually a really nice way of doing it, because it meant that if you were going one way, you had the opportunity to wave and say hello to other people coming in the other direction. So a really nice way of doing it, and the collection of cars that we got to see was really beautiful and quite outstanding actually. Some really unusual cars there for you to have a look at. We really enjoyed our little drive. Me, Jamie, Richard and Michelle did kind of a little convoy in our 2 Trafalgar Blue Morris Minors, but we came across a few older cars as we were driving round, and followed those for a little bit before they decided they wanted to pull over and not have a pair of Morris Minors up their bum and let us overtake. But it was really nice, and like I said, I really enjoyed the aspect of being able to kind of wave at other drivers who were going in the opposite direction. But it was really good that the organisers had actually warned us that that was the case, otherwise we'd have been very worried we were heading in the wrong directions. Following that, we were back at Thoresby Hall, grabbed ourselves a little bit of lunch and had a little wander around some of the cars that had started to congregate on the field. I was actually on a little bit of a mission this weekend to take pictures of as many car badges as possible on the Morrises, to be able to kind of accumulate them all together and make a kind of pattern scarf without the backgrounds and things of all the Morris logos that I could find. So me and Jamie went on a bit of a mission to take as many as we could, especially as the day was dry, so the badges were all dry as well. And whilst we were wandering around, we did actually spot the Morris 6 that had been staying at the same hotel as us. So we said hello, had a really lovely chat to that couple. They had some really lovely stories about how a different Morris 6 had played a really important part in the early stages of their relationship, and so they'd eventually decided to buy one, and they'd been making some lovely new memories in their new car. We also met a pair of gentlemen, one who had a Morris Major, who was very lovely and told us some really interesting information about his car, and also a gentleman who had a Morris 25 Special Coupe, the only one that is known to exist still, and it was really interesting to be able to kind of see that, and it was a really beautiful car, and actually ended up being kind of me and Jamie's favourite car of the whole show. We got quite a few badges, and then we realised that the Gymkhana was being set up, and I was a little bit worried to begin with because everything looked so close together. I thought it was kind of more of a dog assault course than a car assault course. So actually turned out to be fine. We were the 5th or 6th car around it, and I was quite pleased with how we'd done. We'd managed to get the fastest time recorded for the slalom so far, and we'd done reasonably well on some of the other courses. There was an opportunity for the passenger to throw little frisbee circles over various different posts. There was an opportunity for us to do the slalom, but the slalom had the added complication of a tray on your bonnet with a little tennis ball that you had to not have fall off. and I'm pleased to say that our ball did not fall off. Then there was another throwing of beanbags activity where both the driver and the passenger had to take place. And then finally there was a blindfolded driving task where the passenger had to give us some instructions on how to get equally parked between two cones, both going forwards and then into reverse and then backwards and then back forwards into it. It was really challenging. I thought we'd done quite well, but then our friends Liam and Beth had a go and I was filming it, and you can see all that footage on their channel, Austin 7 Adventures, and they absolutely smashed it. They did really well. So we're gonna start training probably in the next few weeks, ready for next year, so that hopefully we can take Beth's first place trophy off of her, which she received the following day during the awards ceremony at the end of the day. So that was kind of Saturday daytime. Saturday evening they did have a Beatles tribute band playing to celebrate kind of the 60th anniversary. But we decided not to kind of go and spend a lot of time in the marquee. We ended up spending, again, the evening really sat with Liam and Beth, and also Yayan and Natasha, who had arrived in patch and a half later on that day. So we were kind of sitting, sheltering from the rain that came that evening, again in the camper ambulance until we headed back to the hotel. Sunday, I guess, was your more traditional car show day. It was a case of parking your car up in your relevant stand area, popping out during the rain showers to see as many cars as you possibly could, and then probably heading back to your car or the marquee to avoid the rain. It was really quite rainy and drizzly for a lot of the day. We actually had the biggest rain shower just minutes after the awards ceremony at the end of the day, before it completely brightened up and was some really lovely weather after that. But it was, regardless of the rain, it was a really nice day. I managed to get a few bits and pieces from the auto jumble, including a steering wheel that I'm hoping to paint red and have as kind of a second steering wheel. I want to keep her steering wheel because I believe it's her original one kind of as is, but I would quite like to have a red one that I use whilst I'm kind of Peggy's owner, to kind of tie in with all my insides. And I got a few Union flag metal badges to go where my wing mirrors are currently, because my wing mirrors are really annoying and I can't open my quarter lights properly. So my plan is to hopefully get some different wing mirrors that clip on to the chrome on my windows, and then put some little Union flags over the old screw holes in the doors. So that's kind of the bits and pieces I picked up. Unfortunately, I was unable to get the kind of bits and pieces that I needed to fix Peggy's latest problem, which was on the way to the event. Somebody kind of told us on a roundabout that actually our brake lights weren't working, so we pulled over at a petrol station that we were getting some petrol at anyway, and I thought that when I'd put a load of stuff in the boot I had kind of pulled one of the wires or something, but that didn't seem to be the case. So we got ourselves to Thoresby Hall and hoped that whatever we needed and any issue we might be able to fix at the show, because we were in what was most likely the best place for it. So we searched the auto jumble for what turned out to be a new brake switch, but unfortunately there was no brake switches on the auto jumble. We did manage to get hold of one from a very kind gentleman, as well as a spanner to get the old one off because it's quite large. However, the old one did not want to come off. It was very unhappy, very stuck on there. So we came up with an alternative way to get kind of some brake lights to come on, and that was just how we were going to get home. And then over this week I've had to go and bother my parents again to help me get the brake bit off and put a new one on. But it's all fixed now, and I'm so happy to be back out in Peggy. But aside from that moment of a little bit of stress where things weren't, I was worried about being able to get home or not being able to get the kind of broken part off without damaging her, it was a really lovely weekend and we had a really fantastic time. It was such a special thing to be part of, so well organised, and I'm really hoping that there's the opportunity for Morris miners to take part again in future. But aside from that, I would really recommend, if you've got any kind of Morris vehicle, looking into that sort of event. I believe it's held at Thoresby Hall most years, really quite a nice central position in the country, and it's a really enjoyable weekend. I can't recommend it more highly. In fact, we enjoyed it so much that we're going to actually look into getting some kind of camping equipment, and whether we can fit it in the car with all my suitcases, and possibly join in with camping and things at these events a little bit more in future. Though it is really nice to be able to come from a really nicely warm, cosy bed in a hotel in the morning. So I hope you've enjoyed my little review of our weekend at the MVA Register anniversary event. If you have, make sure that you're either subscribed on YouTube or following on Spotify, so that you can catch up with some of our previous adventures and have a good listen to anything else we get up to this summer. We've still got a few more events planned, and I've got some other topics that I kind of want to talk to you all about. Thank you all so much for listening. Drive safely and happy motoring.